So until now, what we have discussed about DBT is how to set up models, how to test the models, how to set up the test sources, how to test them. So how to document things. Okay, how can we write similar scripts and how can we write generate scripts. Okay, so how to develop documentation. So all of things we have been seeing till now. Okay, so now let's see. So since we have our first project ready, so we have our sources developed, we have our intermediate models developed, we have our final models developed, so we have our test and scripts in place, right? So we also have our description and doc blocks in place. Okay, so this should be pretty good enough so for a project to deploy it into production, right? So right from the beginning of the raw data, right from getting connecting to the raw data and transforming it to the final layer data. So everything, so we have all our fact models as well as the staging models. Okay, so this project, so whatever we have developed in our development IDE, so we can deploy this same project into the production. Okay, so why do we need to deploy that product, whatever the project we have developed into the production environment is? So there we have an option of scheduling our project. So whenever, let's say right now we have created our models as some staging models as a view and some final data marts as a tables. Okay, so right now what happens is, so every time we kind of do a DBT run, every time we run a DBT run command, so every time those tables will be refreshed, and not only refreshed with new data, so they're also being created as a new tables and new views. Okay, so I can say, every time we do a DBT run, so all these views and models are just going to be recreated. They are just going to get dropped and they will be getting recreated again and again. Okay, so let's say instead of making our final data mart tables as a just tables, so let's say if we have build those models as an incremental models. Okay, instead of the ones which we'll recreate every time we do the DBT run. So let's say we have created those models as an incremental models. Okay, so then what will happen is, so only our final data mart tables, so that is dim customers and fact orders, so will not be recreated every time. So they will just be refreshed with the new data. Okay, so you understand the concept of incremental load, right?
Sir, that means once in the Snowflake database, the data is updated. So here it will automatically reflect.
Yes. So once we run the job, it will automatically reflect. So how that incremental load works is, let's say today, this is let's say this is a kind of e-commerce project. We have customers and we have order details, right? So every day, new customers will keep on adding, right? Every day, new orders will keep on coming, right? So what we can do is, instead of refreshing or rebuilding the tables and again, okay, so these final models you see, right, dim customers and fact orders, so instead of recreating them daily, so we can just add the new data to the old data which is already there. Okay, so instead of recreating everything, so what happens, right, if you want to recreate every time, okay, so suppose, let's say we have some so we are in the first month of the company's establishment, right? So we have somewhere around 500 customers and somewhere around 10,000 orders. Okay, for the 500 customers, let's say we have somewhere around 10,000 orders. Okay, processing data because that is very less data, so processing that data would be much easier, so it would not take much time. Okay, so as the time goes by, okay, so for every month the customers count also will increase and the customer orders also increase, right? So let's say for the second month, we have got somewhere around 25,000. So by the time, so we finish second month, we have around 25,000 orders. Okay. So what happens is now, so instead of, so we only have got 15,000 new customers compared to the first month in the second month. Okay. So let's say if we don't put our model in the incremental thing, so we are just doing the regular DBT run, which will recreate all our models and which will refresh the data. So what will happen is it will again consider the first month's data as well, first month's data as well, and as well as the second month's data. Okay. So right now what it is going to do is, so it is going to run the job for 1,000 customers and 25,000 orders. Okay. So what will happen now? So the data load has increased, right? So as the data load has got increased, so the processing time also will increase, right? The processing time also will increase, so that we'll be getting the data very late. Is this clear? So, but let's say if we are going to run the process only for the new customers and the new orders. Let's say for the second month, we have got some 500 extra customers and some 15,000 extra orders, right? So let's say if we are going to run the job only for those newly added data, that is newly added customers and newly added orders. So we will be going to process, we will be going to run the job only for the 500 newly added customers and the newly added 15,000 customers. Instead of running the job for 1,000 customers and 25,000 customers, we will be running the job for the newly added 500 customers and newly added 15,000 customers. Okay. So that in that way, what will happen is, so the data load will be very less on the computing warehouse. Okay. So that whenever the load is very less, so the time taken, the performance will be more. So the time taken to finish the job will be very less, and the computing cost. So if you're trying to process more data, so you need more compute capacity, right? So if you are using more compute capacity, you will end up paying more. Okay. So that's why, so always in real time, so everything, all the fact orders of the dim tables, the final dim tables would be an incremental things, not just recreating every time or refreshing every time. So they will be in a incremental, they'll be created as an incremental model. Okay. So that whatever the new data is there in the system, so the system will pick up only the new data. Okay. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. So that we will see how we can do that incremental.
Yeah. So in the coming classes, we will see how to develop the incremental models. Okay. So it is just that the materialization will change. Okay. So materialization as an so here if you see, here we have set, right, for the models which are under the Mars folder. So everything should be created as a table. So this is what we have configured, right? And for all the models which are under staging model, so we have configured the materialization as a views. That means all the models that are under the staging folder should be created as a view. So incremental is also a kind of materialization. Okay. So which, I mean, instead of using tables here, we will be putting incremental models. Okay. So do you remember the concept of source freshness? So which we have discussed while
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Creating the sources.
Last 24 hours, 12 hours.
Yes. Like so we had this source freshness block here, right? So we have configured in such a way that if we don't have any data in new data in last 12 hours, it will, whenever the job runs, it will just warn us. Okay. So whenever there is no data in last 24 new data in last 24 hours, so it will throw as an error. Okay. So we can keep that source freshness block here. Okay. So that it will also act as a test. Okay. Since it is a source, it is connected to directly the source tables. Okay. So whenever the job starts, okay, first it will check for the source part. Okay. So whether there are any tests involved in the source. Okay. For the test sources, we have some few tests, right? So for the customers table, we have unique tests and not null tests, and for the same orders table also we have unique and not nulls, right? So these things it will perform. Okay. So whenever you keep this whole project in a job and try to run. So first it will check for the sources, whether we are connected to sources or not. If we are connected, it will check no whether there are any tests scripted for this particular source. If there are any sources tests configured for this source, it will perform those tests. Okay, and along with those tests, so we do have this source freshness flow, which is configured in the sources. So it will kind of check that as well. If you don't have any data, new data in last 24 hours, it is going to halt the job then and there itself. It is not going to continue further. Okay. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and one more thing is, so if you see here, in the beginning, so we have created a model here. So which is add customers repository, which we have created a repository. Under that repository, we have created this add customers model branch. Okay. So under this branch only, we are kind of developing everything now. Right. So this is our development branch. Okay. So if you want to run a particular project or any particular models in kind and deploy them and run on a schedule, so you have to merge this code, all this code into the main branch. Okay. So all this code would be in a main branch. So we call it as a main branch or a master branch. So that would be a dedicated branch for the production projects to run. Okay. So right now we are in the development branch. So we can add multiple branches. Okay. We can add multiple branches here. So right now you might be working on the team customers model, right? So you have created one branch and you're working your whatever you want to work on, whatever you want to develop. So you'll be developing only in that particular branch. Okay. So if there is any of your colleague working on a different project, if he needs to work on a different branch, so he'll under the same main branch, so he will be creating another branch. Okay. Let me see if I can log into that. Show you. We have to solve it. Okay, let me see why it is not showing up here.
You're looking for this repository, right?
Yes. Just wanted to show you here. No, it is not showing up here.
You're logged in, right?
Yep, I'm logged in. Okay. I'll kind of check this. Maybe I haven't given enough permissions to be able to see it here. Yeah, let me see that. Okay. So let's continue this. Okay. So right now, so you understood, right? So we are under our development branch here. So we are not working on our main one. So once you're set up with your GitHub, once you're connected with this DBT and all those things, once you do the initial commit, okay. So the main branch, whenever you create a repository, whatever the branch it has created, that would be the main branch. So that would be set to read only. So we cannot, make any changes. So to the code that is already available in the main branch. So that would be by default set to read only mode. Okay, you will not be able to edit anything in that particular branch. Okay, so to be able to develop your code, you have to create a new branch under that main branch or the master branch, and you have to work in that branch. Okay, so once you have developed and tested here, so you have to commit those changes to the main branch. Okay, you have to commit those changes to the main branch. Okay, if you see here, so these are all the changes so that we have been doing all the while here. Okay, so these are all the changes so that we have been doing all the while. So we have been developing models. We have moved around the models to different folders, right? So we have been adding something to the file. We have been deleting something. Okay. So all those changes, all the files which are being changed or which are being developed, all the while. So you can see those file names here. Okay. So once we are good, once we have developed the models, once you have tried and tested them, so it is the time to commit those changes or commit those files to the main branch. Okay. So once your whatever the project is in the main branch, so then you will be able to schedule those particular jobs or the projects. Okay. So right now, so right from the beginning to the sources to be able to load the final data into our data marts. So that is like a one project or one package, right? So for the first job, we will be connecting the sources and we will be performing some tests on those sources. Okay. And once the source thing is done, so once we are connected to the sources and the data is good, so we will be moving to the staging models. The staging models also, we will run the job. And we will kind of do some generic and singular tests on those particular staging models. Okay. Once everything is good, so we will be moving to the models, smart models. Okay. So here also we will run those smart models. We will load the data, and once the data is loaded, we will kind of check for the data. So whether whatever the test we are given, so all those tests will be performed. So once that is good, it will be the data will be moved to the final data model. Okay. So this is how, our job so this is how we are going to schedule our job. The total package we will be scheduling. Okay. Is this clear? So to be able to schedule the job, so first we have to deploy this project. Okay. So to deploy this project, so we have to create another environment. Okay. So we have to create so right now if you click on the under the deploy, we have something called environments here. Just click on that. So if you see here, so by default and development environment will be set here. Okay. By default, this environment is set. So if you want to create, we have to create a new environment to be able to deploy our project from our development to production environment. Okay. And run those jobs there. Okay. This new environment which we are going to create, so will be by default using the main branch. It will not be using our development branch. So the new environment which you are going to create will be using our main branch. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Just click on create environment. So you see here, so we've got some different settings, so which we have to give. So we can name this anything you want. Let's just this. Okay. So let's keep it the DBT version as it is. And if you see the DBT connection for the Snowflake or deployment connection, okay. So here we have to give our data platform details. Okay. So if you see here by default, so my DBT is connected to this Snowflake, right? So by default, if you want to create a new environment, so the data platform details will be automatically available here. Okay. So if you want to give the role, you can give that. Okay. So anyways, I have one particular role that has been created for this particular DBT jobs, right? So I'm going to give that role, and we are going to work on the database analytics here. And the warehouse which I'm going to use is transforming database, transforming warehouse. Okay. So these are all the details. So if you remember, when I'm connecting my Snowflake to DBT, so I haven't given the role name. So since it was an optional, so I haven't given the role name. So that's why the role name was not seen when I'm creating the new environment. So if you would have given the role name while connecting DBT and Snowflake, so we will see the role name as well. Then it would be populated by default. Okay. Since we haven't given, it is not populated here. So we have given only the database name and the warehouse name there. So that's why those two are auto-populated. Okay. So this is the data platform connection, deployment connection. So now we have to give the deployment credentials. Okay. So right now, so we have only one user in our Snowflake. Okay. So right now in our Snowflake, so we have created only one user. Okay. So which has all the privileges. So which is our account admin thing. So but for the jobs to run in the Snowflake, so it is almost recommendable, like every time recommendable. So we create a new user. Okay. So instead of using the regular user, which you try to log into the Snowflake, so we have to create a new user. Okay. So why? Because so there will be multiple people working on the Snowflake, right? So for all those people, so who are going to deploy their projects and schedule them. So we have to create one particular user which is just for running the jobs. Okay, just for running the jobs. Okay, instead of using your regular username, regular credentials which you try to log in. So we will try to create a service account. That service account is just for running the DBT jobs. Okay. So in real time, so we will not be using our regular credentials. We will not be giving our regular credentials here. So there would be a service account created. So that service account details you have to give here, that username and password. Okay. So if you are connected to any cloud here, so we will be having a key pair. So then we can use that key pair. But if you don't have a key pair and you have to use your username and password, so better we create a new user in the Snowflake. So that would act as a service user. Okay, service account. So and that service account will be used only to run the jobs. Okay, so we should not log into that log into Snowflake using that service account and make some changes. Okay, so that service account should be only used to run the jobs. So that service account is managed by the admin. So you will not be given those details. Okay, so if you want to, so sometimes you want to deploy your project into prod also. So those activities, sometimes those activities will also be performed by the admin, not by you. Okay, since we don't have any service prod account as of now, so I'm just going by the regular username which I'm using to log into Snowflake. Okay, and one more thing is, so right now we are working on the database analytics. Okay, so we have been building our models inside this DBT info schema. Okay, so if you want your so here's my development thing, right? So if you want your prod job to develop your models in a separate schema, you can specify that. Okay, so all the jobs, all the tables or views which are going to be created under this project will be created under prod schema, not under this NDR DBT and info. Okay, so right now whatever the models I'm developing, so I've given the schema name as DBT underscore N info. But so since we are going to deploy our project to prod, so prod will have separate schema. Okay, so you or else you can keep it in the same schema, but it is always recommended to keep the prod jobs or the main jobs, main table separately. So we are going to give the schema name as prod. Okay, so whatever the jobs, whatever the tables that is tables or views that is going to be created using this uh, particular job, so will be created under prod schema. Okay, so is this clear? So we have given this general settings, deployment settings, and
Yes, sir.
deployment credentials. So just click on save. So once you click on save, so we are in the development environment. So if you see here, we don't have any jobs created as of now. Okay. So or else you can just click on create one here if you want to create one, or else you can just, we have under this deploy option, we have something called jobs here. Okay, so here also you can do a create job. So both are same. This here. So you have to give your job name here. Okay. So this is my job name. So what I'm doing is load customers and orders data daily. So it is a daily job, so which I'm going to run. Okay. So we have to give the environment here and the DBT version. So whatever the version which we have given while creating the environment deployment environment, so that will be taken directly here. The target name and threads are the default ones. And if there are any environment variables, so if you see here, so we have a concept next to the environments. So we have something called environment variables. Okay. So here, what is about environment variables is, so they will be specific to those variables. So let's say we have two environments, right? Okay. So we have now development environment and deployment environment. Okay. So now, so if you remember, just now we have given, we have changed the schema name for these prod jobs. So we have given the name as prod. Okay. So let's say we have something called other environment called UTA. Okay. like user UAT thing. Okay. So we do have two environments now, deployment and UAT. Okay. So if you, what happens is, so if you know, if you have not given any schema name, so I'm just giving this, I'm just taking the schema name example here. There are more you can work on, but so let's say, whenever a job is running on a prod environment, those tables or views should be created in a prod schema. And whenever a job is running on the UAT environment, so the schema should be UAT. Okay. So those things you can configure here. So you were creating the environment we are given, right? Even if you don't give the schema name there while creating the environment, since you have created the environment variables, so those are very specific to the environment. If a job is running on the production environment, by default, the schema will be taken as prod. See, because we have given instructions in this, we have added a variable that the schema should be prod here. Okay. So that's where our environment variables comes handy here. Right now, we don't have any environment variables, so we are not going to use them. So coming to the execution settings, so we do have some options to build here. So here, so this is where you will add your commands, DBT commands. So which command you want to run. So by default, you can see DBT build here. So which will do run our models, and as well as simultaneously, which will test our models. Okay. So you can add multiple models, multiple commands also here if you want. So or else we can just go with DBT build. Okay. Now let's check in this one, run source freshness. Okay. So this what checking in this command means. So whenever we are starting our whenever the job is going to start, okay. So in the beginning itself, it will check for the source freshness block. Okay. It will check for the source freshness. So if there is any new data available, so then only it will continue to running the whole job. So if there is no new data, it will halt the job then and there itself. Okay. And one more thing is generate DBT docs on run. So whenever any new data is coming, so whenever we will run the project. So the documentation will also be refreshed. Okay. The documentation will also refresh. Okay, let's say today we have scheduled our job, and today it is finished running. Okay, so what we have done is tomorrow we have made some more changes. Okay, we might have added some new tests as well. Okay, and committed to the main branch, right, with the same name. What this DBT will do? So with the same, since it is the same name, right? So the same job will run today as well. But the thing is, in the same project, we have added new tests, and we have added some new configurations. Okay. So those things will not be available in our DBT documentation. If we just check on this column, check on this thing. So what will happen is every time the job runs, it will kind of refresh the DBT documentation so that our documentation is up to date. So we don't have to worry about the documentation. Okay. So whenever the job runs, it will kind of refresh our documentation. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here we are just going with the DBT build command. Okay. So here and the next section is triggers. So triggers is where we are going to schedule our job. So we're going to run it on a schedule. So we will be having multiple options here. So I chose to run my job only on the weekdays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay. So here we will be having different options. Okay. So if you want to run your job every 1 hour, you can give, or else exact intervals. So at what time you want. Okay. Let's say I want so you should remember one thing is, so all these timings are in, all the scheduled job timings will be in UTC, GMT timings. Okay. Let's say right now, so we in our Indian timing is 9, right? So UTC will be minus 5:30. So 9 minus 5:30 hours. So somewhere it will be some 4 o'clock, 4:30 or so. Okay. So if you want to schedule our job, schedule your job in next half an hour. So you should not give 9:30. So you should give somewhere around 5 o'clock. That means if you give 5 UTC, so that will be like 9:30 IST. Okay. So all these things will be in UTC timings. Okay. Is this clear? So I want to schedule my job at 9:30 IST. So I have to give 5 here. Okay.
And you can give cron also, the other option.
Yes, yeah, we have the option of cron scheduling also. So if you want to scale, if you want to give,
Same as cron.
Yeah. So like how in the Snowflake things we have, right?
Hour and day.
Yes, minute, scale, seconds, anything you want, you can schedule it here.
Sir, and what is this continuous integration and API tabs?
See, continuous integration is, so whenever we have this, whenever we have this real-time kind of data. So let's say whatever we have discussed is now, not a real-time kind of data. So we will be getting yesterday's data, okay? Today, so whatever the job that is running today, so that will be picking up the yesterday's data and it will be processing it and loading it into our tables. Okay. So if you want to pull data, so let's say we have some web services which will be continuously ingesting the data. If you want to process that data, so we can use this continuous integration one. So it will be, continuously pulling the data and it will be in some particular intervals and it will be continuously running pushing the data into our data models. Okay. So we can use this continuous integration in our real-time things. Whenever there is any real-time ingestion, we can use there. Okay.
Yes, sir. And API?
So API, I'm not much sure, so I haven't much seen this. Let me see.
Example
okay, so it might be triggered via API. Okay. So whenever an API request comes, so we might have some applications. Okay. So we might have some external applications using. So whenever you click on something, an API request comes to DBT. Okay. So whenever an API request comes, so then only this job will run. So how we can do is, so instead of connecting to DBT, so there will be a web interface. Okay. So in the web interface itself, you can control things. Okay. So let's say you have some, instead of scheduling this job, so you want to trigger it manually. Okay. So if in the APS, we cannot schedule the job. So we can just trigger it. Okay. So let's say, every day, the client gives you confirmation. So the data is loaded. So then only you have to run the job. So so in those cases, there is no point in scheduling the job at a particular time. Okay. Because we have to get confirmation from your client. Right. So in those cases, what we can do is, so we can set up a web interface kind of thing. Okay. We can set up a web interface kind of thing. So where you can just click run now. So whenever you get the confirmation from the client, so in your web interface, so which is connected to DBT, so that should be there. So we just click on run now. So what that will do is it will send an API request to DBT. So in the background, so in the front end, what you're doing is you're just clicking on run now command. So in the background, what it is doing is it is just sending an API request to DBT. So whenever an API request comes, okay, this particular job, whatever you have scheduled, whatever you have prepared, this job will run. Okay. And this will load the new data into our MART models. Okay. So is this clear with the example?
Not clear, sir. Actually, APIs, I'm not familiar.
Okay. See, APIs are nothing but, so you'll be keep on sending the requests. Okay. Let's say you want some data. So you want some website.
So means how the request comes into this DBT.
So we have to write some code there. So whenever I'm just taking an example of web interface, just because it will be very useful. I mean, it would be very clear. Okay. So how API request comes is, whenever you send an request, so it would be like, sending request and receiving request. So API works in that way. Okay.
No,
You send a
sending
message.
means sending request from where?
So there will be an API system setup actually. API is a different system that we have to set up. So
okay,
we have
means
to.
How
we
you
have
are
to,
catching that here? How you are linking the API here?
See,
Just we are
let
calling.
me tell you. So how APIs works are, you send a message to a C. Let's say you are one system. Okay. There are two systems, A and B. Okay. So B is getting loaded data every time. Okay. So from some source. Okay. And A want that data as well. So what A will do is, A will send a message to B. Okay. A will send an API request to B. And in return response, B will also send a response to A. Okay. So these are, this whole thing works on the requests and responses. Okay.
So you're telling that A will send a request to B.
And B will be responding to that.
How we are catching that here?
So that's what we have to set up those API systems. This API we have to download.
But from here you will only call it, right?
Yes. So in DBT, we are not, in DBT, we have to just configure that. Okay. We have to just configure that. So to which API, from which API we are getting the request. Okay. So to every API we get the request, we cannot run the job, right? So there will be a particular key. I mean, to identify from which system we are getting the request. Okay. So we have to give authorization for that. Okay. So we have to tell our DBT. So if you receive a request only from this particular system, then only you have to start the job. We have to configure that.
Okay.
So if you receive a request only from this system, you have to start the job. If you receive an API request from some other systems, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. So an example is that, just like I told you. So there's, let's say, we have some, so there is a web interface. Okay. Right. So in a website, what happens? Okay. So whenever, let's say you take the Facebook or the Gmail. Okay. So, what you see is just an interface, web interface. Okay. So what it will do. So whenever you click, whenever you click on create post, okay, so it will just open that window. Whenever you type and submit that something, so what it will do is instantly, so whatever the message you have written there, so it will be first stored in their databases, right? In the background, it will be first stored in their databases.
So we enter the data, it will go to some application server and then.
Yes. So in the background, there will be application servers, there will be databases, right? So there will be some networking system, so which will be working for you. Okay. In the same way, so the API request also work. Okay. If you so API request or something, okay, you can API request also you can schedule from the other system. So you cannot schedule here in the DBT. Okay. In the API systems are also something we can, schedule. So we have to write some C# script or Python script to invoke the APIs. Okay. To invoke those APIs, we can write a schedule there. Or else, so they might be in the form of an exe file. The exe files, right? Executable files.
Yes. So the exe file you will give here.
No, I'll just run the exe file in my system, which has that API configuration. Okay. So, the exe files, right?
Yes.
.exe files. Okay. So insert those exe files is also a code. So in that code, I will write I'll configure my API. So I'll give my DBT details, DBT connection details, DBT login details, and which job it should run. So everything I will be configuring in that API. So whenever I run that exe, so my API system, which is configured, will send a request to DBT. Okay. So whenever my DBT receives that request from API, so it will straight away start this job. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sure.
I think you're not still clear about this. I mean, you might
No,
have.
no. Means whatever you told, I'm clear on that. Only thing is in DBT, like how we will be scheduling it. I'm not.
See, whenever you're using this API, we are not going to schedule this. We are
Just
not going to schedule this at
calling.
all. See, here we are just creating a job right now. Okay, we are just creating a job. If you see here, if you want to schedule the job in DBT, you just have to click on the schedule. Okay, you can just give some ground schedule or give your schedule like this. Okay, this is where we are scheduling our DBT jobs.
Okay.
So whenever you are coming to API, we are not scheduling this. We are just creating a job.
Okay.
We are just creating a job. We are not scheduling this here.
Understood.
We are not scheduling this anymore. Okay.
Yes. You're just
So
calling.
we are configuring it such a way that whenever you get a API request, then only you run.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's what we are telling DBT. So don't run on a schedule. So whenever you get an API request, then you run.
Okay.
So that's what we are telling you. And what are the configuration we have to give? So we have to tell from which API you should from which API you will receive the request. That thing we have to give the information. From which API DBT will be getting the request. So we have to provide that information. Okay. So from this API, you will be getting the request. Then only you run. That's what we are telling it.
Okay.
We are not scheduling it here at all. Okay.
Yes, sir. Understood.
It is on-demand run. On-demand run. So it is not a scheduled one. So whenever you want this job to run, you trigger an API request and run this job. Whenever, if you don't trigger the API job, it will not run at all. So you might trigger the API weekly once, daily once, or monthly once. That depends upon your requirement. Okay.
Yes.
So if you want this particular job to run daily on a particular time, you just use this schedule thing. If you want to run this particular job on demand whenever you want, just go for the API things and configure an API. Okay. See, this DBT job is in one server, right? Let's say this is an EC2 machines. Okay, let's talk about laptops. So right now, this DBT job is created in my system, right? In my laptop. Okay. So will you be able to run this particular job from your laptop? Hello.
Yes, I can run it.
How can you run it?
So I need to, once I build the master branch, I need to schedule it here in the.
So how will you do this? So it is created. So this whole project is in my laptop. Okay. So those are my credentials. So whatever the things, Snowflake credentials, GitHub, or the DBT are my credentials. Okay. This whole thing is in my laptop, in my system. So how will you commit to the prod from your system? Do you have any credentials?
So
do you have any access?
No.
No, right? You don't have access to my system at all.
Right.
So how will you merge this to main branch and schedule the job, run the job? You cannot do that, right?
No, I cannot do it. Only
Without
thing is
proper access, you cannot do.
Yeah, I need to get access to the repository and put.
Yeah, you don't need to get access to the repository also. If you can get access to this DBT account, okay. So if you can get access, if you can get credentials of this particular DBT account, so we can just directly log into DBT and click on run the job.
Right.
Then the job will run. So if you don't have credentials, what you will do?
I need to get the authorization.
Yes. So for this, since this is the main system, okay, since this is the main server, you will not get access to log into the system. So
Right.
for all the main servers, you will not get access to log into the system.
Right.
You can just see those things, but you cannot run or modify anything. Okay. For all those main servers or pod servers, you'll get only read-only access. You'll not get any run access or modify access, right? So in those cases, if you want to run this but still you want to run this job. So what we can do is we can set up an API. So you will set up an API in your system, okay? And give me your API keys, okay? And we need some other logins. We need some other aspects also. So you will give me whatever the details that you have of the API which you have installed in your system. Okay. So those with those API details, I will create this job for you. So here I will give the API keys and I'll give the API configurations in this particular job. And I will configure this job in such a way that so whenever an API request comes from your system, this job will run. So I'll configure it in such a way.
Okay.
Okay. So what will happen is, so whenever you trigger an API from your system, so in my particular server, this job will run.
Okay.
So until and unless you trigger an API, this job won't run. Because it is not scheduled one. It is an API triggered one. Okay. API triggered job. So whenever an API request comes, then only this job will run. Okay. Otherwise, this job will not run.
Customer also will run once I send the request and.
Yeah. So not only DIM customers. So all the upstream models to the DIM customers will run.
Yes.
Right from the source to the final data model.
Right.
Okay. So whenever you trigger an API request from your system, so that request will come to my server. So and DBT will recognize that particular request and will run the job for you.
Okay. Understood.
Okay. This is clear how the API request work?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the scheduling is different and this triggering is different. So we call this as a scheduling and we call this as a triggering.
Okay.
So someone has to trigger.
Right.
So until and unless someone triggers, it won't run. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is how we can schedule our jobs. So we can create, we can have a schedule, or we can have a API triggeration, or we can have a continuous integration ones. Okay. So we have 3 different ways actually. So you can add multiple commands here, whatever the commands you want to run, you can add those things. And just click on save. So in the run history, we don't have anything as of now because it is just now created and it is not run yet. So if you click on jobs, so you will see this. You will see our first job, which is load customer order daily, which is our job name. Okay, and you can see the environment and you can see whether it is scheduled or not. Okay.
Yes.
So if you see, it has not run yet, and the next run will be in an hour. Okay, in 1 hour, in the next 1 hour, it will run. So within 1 hour, anytime it can run. Okay. If you just open up that job, you will see the run history here. Okay. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So with this, now we kind of finished. So whatever we want to, whatever we have scheduled till now, all the fundamental things we have covered. Okay. So maybe next class, maybe I'll talk about the material types of materializations. Okay, we'll see that. So those are not scheduled initially in the course, but because on demand. So we will be talking about the materializations as well as, so we can kind of go into some other topics as well from the next class. Okay. So this is, so up to here, we kind of build the sources, we kind of build the intermediate models, we kind of tested them. So we have seen how to document them, and we have seen how to deploy our project into production and schedule that. Okay, so this is what we have covered until now. Okay, this is from one end-to-end project. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you can kind of practice these things. Okay, so once we are good with that, so we can see. So we till now we have seen only two types of materializations, that is table and view. Okay, so we will see more kind of materializations. Like I said, we have something called incremental, okay. So we have different materializations. We will talk about those things as well in the next class. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Gundi.